The ask should feel so comfortable. When you get to that place, you have been fully transparent. So now it comes the time when you just say, talk to me about what this gift looks like to you.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange, a podcast from IPM Advancement. Our mission is to help you raise more money so you can make the world a better place. Today's topic, major gift fundraising. Most nonprofits rely on a small percentage of their donors to provide the majority of their funds. In fact, a statistic quoted from AFP's Fundraising Effectiveness Project suggests that as much as 88% of charitable dollars raised comes from just 12% of donors. And as the wealth gap in the United States grows wider, it's very likely that the importance of these major donors will only increase in the years to come. In today's podcast episode, we've assembled a panel of major gift fundraising experts to discuss what it takes for a nonprofit to create and sustain a rewarding major gift fundraising program. Back again to lead today's panel discussion on major gift fundraising is IPM Advancement's senior consultant, Rich Frazier. Rich is joined today by fellow IPM consultant Elizabeth Silverstein, Nuka, the CEO of Free Wheelchair Mission, and Shanelle, Varone, the Senior Administrative Director of Philanthropy at Children's Mercy Hospital. Take it away, Rich.
Hi, I'm Rich Frazier, Senior Consultant for IPM Advancement. Joining me today to talk about major gift fundraising are Nuka from Free Wheelchair Mission, Shanelle Varone from Children's Mercy Hospital, and Beth Silverstein, also a consultant from IPM Advancement. And I'm going to ask each of you, if you don't mind, just to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the organization you represent, and share a brief description of your experience with major gift fundraising. And Nuka, why don't we start with you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Free Wheelchair Mission. We distribute wheelchairs all over the world for free to those in need. So we're a humanitarian organization. We're also a faith-based organization. We have about 30 or so employees in Southern California and also in other parts of the U.S. and globally. And we've been around for 20 years doing this because there are 75 million people in the world that need a wheelchair. The need is great, and we're just putting a dent in it. My previous role was to lead up major gifts for an organization called United Way, and I've had previous experience to that in major gift fundraising specifically. For us at Free Wheelchair Mission is different than in other organizations I've worked for. I would say about half of the donations that we get in our organization are coming from individuals, and then there's a portion of that is major donors, a good portion. And then we also get a good amount of people giving through institutions like donor advised funds and different funds of that nature. And then, of course, there are companies, churches, foundations that give us major gift level donations annually as well.
Great, thank you. Shanelle, how about a little bit about your organization and your background in major gifts?
Sure. I'm Shanelle Varone. I work at Children's Mercy here in Kansas City, Missouri. We support pediatric healthcare in both states, Kansas and Missouri, in our region. We have 18 locations. We're a $3.5 billion healthcare institution, 55 subspecialties, and we see just over 500,000 patients every year. So very big area that we take care of. I have been in major gift fundraising for over 22 years. I too worked at United Way Nuka. So that's where I cut my teeth on learning how to fundraise, and then came over here about 15 years ago. So we focus on individuals, businesses, foundations that are interested in supporting the hospital.
Super. Thank you. And Elizabeth Silverstein, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am a consultant at IPM Advancement, and IPM is an exciting firm. We're a full service firm helping not-for-profits really find the best in themselves, helping them raise funds, helping them with their boards and their structure. And we really believe that by helping the not-for-profit community that their mission is our mission, and we are ultimately making the world a better place, one not-for-profit at a time. So it's very exciting to be with you today. I have an extensive background in major gift fundraising. I've been in this business over 35 years. I've spent the majority of my career in healthcare and higher ed. I have been in K-12 education. I have supported and helped presidential libraries, social service organizations. So it is an interesting array when it comes to major gift work.
Thank you very much, everybody. So today's topic is major gifts, which, as we know, is a very broad topic. So let's start with the very basics. What sets major gift fundraising apart from annual fundraising? Shanelle.
So it's interesting that you asked this question because we are just closing up our fiscal year end and we look at our goals and where we're hitting and our major gift group. So we quantify a major gift. Let's start there, $25,000 or more. Now that can be spread out up to 5 years to be paid, but that's kind of the bulk. So that's how we quantify. So those take longer. They're more personal relationships. They can take 1,000 different turns. And when a pandemic happens, that really impacts that side. The annual fund is different, right? Like people still get their mail. There were more people at home. They took more time to read their mail. And so we're actually seeing that that was a little bit more fruitful for us.
You know, for us at Pre-Wheelchair Mission, it's a lot different. And it took me a while to get used to this. For us, a major gift starts at $5,000. I would say a good number of the major donors that give to us give far more than that. And we measure it a lot of times associated with the amount of wheelchairs that they're giving, whether it's a container of wheelchairs, which is over 44,000 plus thousand, per container, which is about 500 wheelchairs, or even less than that are the quantities that we're looking at. But our team looks at it as any gift that's $5,000 or more classifies as a major gift, which for me was a rude awakening because I was used to United Way, 10,000 and above. And when I worked at the Archdiocese, it was hundreds of $1,000s and above. And so your question is an interesting one because for us, we look to make those major gifts annual. We don't really make a distinction in terms of, a major gift being a life event or a taxable event or an extraordinary event. We look to try to renew that with the supporter either annually or sometimes even multiple times of the year. So it's a different way of looking at it. And I think part of it is because our price point to come in and to giving to us is so much lower than per se some other organizations may be.
The price point is an interesting topic to bring up because you're right. Depending on the nonprofit, price points are all over the place. So let's talk about the importance then of a major gifts program. So what is the importance for the nonprofit and what is the importance to the donor of a major gift?
What's a little bit different about us is people pay to come. And so what major gifts do here at Children's Mercy is they will set us up to have a big project, to build a building, to expand or start a program. And so they really do help us direct and accomplish some really big transformational goals. And so that's exciting to be a part of. And I think that on the opposite end, the donors feel that, which is really fun. They know that they can elevate an institution and create a new program or expand the purpose. And then alongside, we still do have a lot of families and businesses that want to support uncompensated care. They understand that they are able to provide the excellence in healthcare. They're able to get us that new piece of equipment that makes us cutting edge, but they also know that it should be available for everyone. And that's the meaning and love, I think, of the major gift work too.
So for the organization, the major gifts, they help you accomplish beyond the day-to-day. For the donor, they really get to see the impact, an immediate impact for what they do, or the long-term impact.
Absolutely.
Nuka, do you want to weigh in there?
Well, I think for us, major gifts carry the day. They are what typically sustain the organization to make sure that your mission is operating and also that you are able to keep your infrastructure in place. That's not to say that lower level gifts do not have their place, particularly if they're reoccurring or have an annualization to them. They can be very much projected for, right, in advance, and you can count on a certain percentage to come in. But major gifts, I think of them as sustaining an organization because they are dependent upon good relationships and what you know. And when you have a good relationship and you know something, you can potentially hope to expect a certain amount, and then you can build a plan and project for a plan for the future, a strategic plan, an annual plan, a budget plan, whereas the smaller gifts are transactional a lot of times, and you can't really plan as much for those unless, again, they are reoccurring and you have some sort of an arrangement with the supporters that you don't need to make the ask, but you can count on those gifts coming in all the time.
So both of you, I mean, so Shanelle, you're in a large hospital system and you're doing millions of dollars worth of projects, and Nuka, you're in an organization that has a global impact. For a smaller organization that doesn't have a major gifts program, how would you suggest that they start?
Oh, it's funny. I was just giving somebody this advice. They're trying to start, or they have started an organization to feed the homeless. And they were asking me, should we do an event? Should we do an appeal for, small gifts? And I always think that you should start with what you know. I think the best organizations are founded, and ours is this success story 20 years ago, with a close-knit group of people that have a vested interest in the mission, that either form a board or a committee or just band together their resources. And I don't just mean financial resources, but I mean their expertise to lend to the organization to get them off of the ground. And hopefully the financial resources are those first major gifts, right? That plant the seed for the organization to become viable and to exist. And so that's how you start, is finding the seed capital, finding those donors, because not only do you need their resources, but then you need them to do that peer-to-peer asking for you, because the organization doesn't have a track record, right? They, all of the regulatory agencies, whether it be Charity Navigator or anything like that, typically don't give you a lot of credibility if you're just starting off of the ground. It's difficult to get foundations to give you grants if you don't have a 990. And so you've got to start somewhere. And to start is to have that funding initially and to have peer-to-peer meeting those initial major donors that are going to tell their friends that they believe in the mission. So I would say start there. And then after that, think of what's the bigger picture idea. Is it that you want to have relationships, which is what Major Gifts is all about, relationship management, or are you going to do a different model, which is more transactional and turnkey, where you rely on, those smaller gifts being your bread and butter over the course of a year or over a long term?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think when you pull in your closest friends and start to really ask them those very specific questions, like, where do we fall in your philanthropic priorities? How do we line up with other institutions and why? You'll start to get some of that feedback, and then build those advocates so that they can kind of be your tentacles out there to be a committee, to go ahead and ask other people to get involved and join you.
So Beth, what have you seen out there in your experience?
Foundational to donor engagement is your case for support. And before you can even do really much of anything, you really need to understand where you're coming from. And that is also the best way to engage your major gift donors or your hopeful major gift donors, by including them in articulating that case for support and understanding what's important about what you do and how it resonates with the donor. So as you're starting to build those relationships, including those conversations about the why you're doing what you're doing and understanding how that resonates, will naturally lead to, oh, well, then you should know this person and you should know that person. And there should be some relationship mapping that happens. So it all happens so beautifully and organically. And I'm with you, Nuka. You really can't have an event to do that. This is all one-on-one. This is, solution-driven philanthropy. We've got a need and we're meeting it, and we've got a solution for meeting that need. Help us articulate that solution. Help us to be part of it.
So for somebody who's not an experienced fundraiser or even a major donor for that matter, it can be hard sometimes to understand the motivation for making a donation that is 4, 5, 6, or even more figures. Can you help the listener understand the typical profile of a major donor? And to add to that, what's the reward to the donor for making a gift of that size?
Understanding the difficult profile of the major donor. I say to my team, it's sort of like dating. You know, we say the word relationship and cultivation and the word stewardship, but dating is about getting to know someone to make a decision about whether you're going to be with them for the long term. And it's complex because everybody's unique. And the reason for which or by which people give is unique. There's some commonalities, and hopefully they're centered around the mission. But even whatever the mission may be, there's a specific reason that is for that person, why they give versus someone else. And I think the responsibility of the fundraiser is to tap in and understand that and not to make assumptions. And the only way you understand it is by getting to know the person. So when you say understanding it, it's really about just learning the people that the prospects or the individual that is your donor and seeing what makes them tick. Just like in a relationship of dating, you're not going to, hopefully, if you want to be successful, make the assumption that someone loves flowers or make the assumption that they love chocolate. You're going to try to decipher that or understand it and understand what motivates them as a whole so that you could be a better date to them. And in this case, a better fundraiser. With us, we give out wheelchairs, and obviously people have to have some sort of an interest in helping people in that way. But some people give to us because they like the fact that our founder was an engineer and our product is an innovative product. They're not so much a fan of us because that we give to all these different countries. They love the fact that we are innovative. Another person may love us because of the fact that we are global and they're an expat, or they just love the fact that we have a widespread influence and impact. And so it's important for us to understand that, because if we do, then we can tap into what areas of our work will continue to resonate with an individual, so that when we make those future solicitations, we're honing in on the things that are specifically interesting to them. I hope I answered your question. It's not an easy one because everybody's different.
Right. And there's no typical, right?
Yeah. For me, that's the major takeaway that I learned along the way, is that just because you work for an institution and that you have a specific mission, it doesn't mean it's one size fits all for every major donor. Your job is to figure that out.
I'm so glad you went down that dating route, though. I do a lot of training with boards of directors, and I think we all can agree that a lot of boards of directors are very antsy when it comes to fundraising. And I use that analogy a lot, that fundraising is not all about asking for money. As a matter of fact, very little of it is about asking for money. That it's really about the courtship, and the asking for money is the you may kiss the spouse moment.
Yes.
And then the rest of it is the rest of the marriage.
Yes.
And that we have to maintain this happy relationship with the donor for hopefully a really, really long time. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of your best practices when it comes to cultivating and building that relationship with the donor? And what are some of your best practices when it comes to stewarding your major donors?
I think that's all about values. When you start to talk to somebody about giving away their discretionary income, because that's what we're asking. We're not asking for money that they need to pay the bills or buy a car, put their kids through college. We're asking for money you can give away that you don't ever look to regain. You never want to get it back. You're helping somebody else. So that takes a value position with the other person to say, this is what I believe, and this is what you believe. And I believe by me allowing you to have my discretionary income, you will take it to make the world a better place.
The most important thing is to listen and to make sure that we really understand where our donor is coming from and what, as Nuka said and Shanelle has said, resonates with the donor. So what is it that the donor has in their heart that they want to gain from this experience? And I do believe that when it comes to major gifts are investments. And I believe that they are expecting an outcome of very clearly expecting an outcome. And that should be articulated at the time of the gift as well. So we need to really understand what it is that the donor expects as a return on his or her investment.
Hi, this is Curtis from IPM Advancement jumping in for a moment. If you're a nonprofit professional who has questions about your program, or maybe you feel like you've taken your advocacy, fundraising, or membership effort as far as you can and you need some fresh ideas, we have a special offer for you today. NPFX podcast listeners can get a free 30-minute consultation with IPM, no strings attached, when you go to ipmadvancement.com/free. Just enter a few details and an IPM team member will contact you to follow up. It's that easy. That website again is ipmadvancement.com/free. Thanks for listening, and we hope to talk to you soon. Now let's return to the episode.
We're all fundraisers. We love stories. Does anybody have a particular example that they'd like to share? Any stories that you'd like to tell?
One of my most favorite fundraising stories was I met a guy in a bar, as any good fundraising story goes.
I can respect that.
Going back to the dating again.
No, I was at a, professional happy hour. And what do you do for a living? Most people, as you guys know, when you say I'm a fundraiser, they're like, do you get paid for that? Is this a real job? And then, 20 minutes later, I could do that because anybody could do it, right? So that's our favorite part. So we start having a conversation. He says, well, I actually have a foundation. Do you know what that is? I'm like, yeah, I know what a foundation is. And well, actually, it's tied to my grandfather who actually used to work at your hospital. And I think we should have a bigger conversation. Fast forward, his grandfather actually started a section here at the hospital. Like back in the 50s, when we didn't have really paid staff, he was a volunteer that would come in on his time off and started a section. So I start doing all this digging. I'm like, do you even understand how amazing your grandfather was? And it cultivated to this huge relationship. We ended up naming the clinic and an endowed position after his grandfather. When we got the surgeon that's current now here, he pulled out ratty books that he had been practicing off of that this gentleman's grandfather had written in pen, that he was still using his techniques today. It was one of the most profound days of my entire career.
That is an amazing story. And it started with, I met a guy in a bar. So
I have one that has to do with, sometimes you think that the reason they're giving is associated with the mission, but sometimes it's more emotional than that. In my case, there was he was a board member of an organization that I work for. I won't say the names. And he actually, it turned out after many conversations of me getting to know him, he gave to us because of his father, because his father used to give to the organization. And so initially, I would say it wasn't because of what the organization was doing, but it was kind of out of respect and legacy because of his father. But he grew into his love for the organization as we got to know each other and he got more involved to then pass the baton to his son. And when he was coming off of the board, I did a surprise party thing for him, send off with his son and another part of his family there to kind of honor all of that he had done to really pass on philanthropy to his family and the importance of that. So sometimes, as I say, it's not about the actual mission. There's other things underlying and unpacking that. And it's similar to what Shanelle shared. There's other layers. And if you tap into that, you now have a whole generation and more continuing to give and an appreciation for what you did for them in return, which is giving them something back.
that's a wonderful story. And again, that goes back to listening to your donors, your constituents, and understanding what they're about and what they're interested in. And for both of those cases, you really didn't have to make an ask.
Mm-mm.
It happened because they wanted it to happen. let's talk about, though, the ask, though, because sometimes we do have to make an ask. Sometimes there is that kiss the spouse moment. And let's talk about that, because, there's going to be a lot of listeners to this episode who really they're getting antsy right about now and saying, okay, but I need to improve my asking skills. How do I do that? So how do we make that initial approach to asking for a major gift? And Beth, I'm going to look at you, because I when I think of Beth Silverstein, I think of closer. So talk us through this.
So I know it's going to sound really weird, but honestly, the ask should feel so comfortable. When you get to that place, you have been fully transparent. You have had all of the conversations about why and the back and forth with this donor. You know each other. So now it comes the time when you just sit down and say, talk to me about what this gift looks like to you. You can come at it with a billion different ways. If you don't ask for an amount, you may get a little shorted. I've seen a couple times where it actually kind of got a little bigger, but I always suggest that there is an amount, and that amount should feel really comfortable when you ask for it. You should have done a lot of homework, and you should really know as best as you can, and you should have that level of transparency with that donor. So when you're sitting down with the donor and you're saying, we're in this campaign, or we're going to do this project, it is this amount of money, are you able to participate at this level?
I couldn't agree more. If I go back to the boy in the bar, I literally asked him about this foundation. I said, so what's in it? Where did it come from? Are you willing to give it all to me? And he said to me, if you're willing to put my grandfather's name on some stuff, let's talk about it. So then that took me down the road of like, what are our naming conventions? What would we put his name on and what level? And so then we put together a menu. And what he came back with was he loved the menu and he said yes to all of it. So I think you've got a lot of great points inside there, Beth. You have to formalize it, and you have to make it really clear and easy to understand. But then they have the option to go, oh, wow, this is what I want. Back to the values. This is what I think is important, is putting his name on something. And there are actually a couple of places I could put his name on that.
I think Beth said it best earlier when she said you have to listen. And then you said it best as well when you said it should come easy. Because if you're listening, you should already know what's going to resonate with them. And the way you ask one donor may not be the way you ask the next. There's some people where it may take you months and even a year or more to get that ask out, because you just need the time to figure them out, or the right project hasn't come together to solicit them for. And others, it could be the boy at the bar, or it could be after just 2 meetings, or it could even be, and I know some people cringe at this, it could even be on the phone after many in-person conversations, because you know that that's what's going to work for them. And the listening and the figuring out is so key, because if you do it wrong, it could go sideways, right? Because you didn't ask them in the way that they would appreciate. There's some donors that don't want you to be long-winded. They want you to cut right to the chase. And there's other donors that want all of the flowers and going back to the dating, or the proposal rich, right? Mm-hmm. They want all of the whole proposal and all the accoutrements that come with that, and the name on the brick and in the foyer or the lobby. And you just have to understand and know what would resonate with them most.
And I want to circle back to something that Shanelle said, and about the recognition piece. That's a really interesting topic in and of itself, because you got to know if that's what they want. I mean, and that helps a lot. I mean, if you know that they are kind of wanting to do something special to remember somebody or in some way chronicle the moment, that is actually very helpful, because that puts you right into a target range, and you know right then and there what you need to ask for. But then there are those donors who really want to be quiet, and they don't want any of it. And you've got to know that too. So you really have to know going into that conversation, what kind of conversation that's going to be. Is it going to attach quickly and clearly to an opportunity for naming? And with endowed chairs, that's beautiful, because you've got a dollar amount right there. You know what you have to have. Or is this an anonymous or a more quiet donor who's just doesn't want any of that? So you just have to know like what it is you're asking at the time you're asking.
Let's take this dating game a step further. The COVID-19 pandemic, it forced us fundraisers to go virtual for the last year and a half or so. What did we learn about virtual fundraising and major donors? And what do we take away? What's the future hold for us?
In our case, I think there were a lot of hidden blessings. We were nervous. I was nervous. As an executive looking at the organization as a whole, it really made me antsy. But if I really look at it, it was actually a good thing that happened to us. It forced us to modernize some things that we had been thinking to do for a long time in terms of online presence and social media and that sort of a thing. But I don't know about you, but for us, that first 9 months or 10 months of lockdowns and COVID were phenomenal because everybody was reachable by phone. We were not getting voicemails. And not only that, you could mail them something to their house and it didn't seem that they thought it was junk mail. So all of a sudden, direct mail pieces were so amazing and exciting. And they were actually reading our newsletters because it was different than being on Zoom and everything else that people were tired of. So there were some positives there for us. We actually exceeded our goals. We had a phenomenal virtual event, our first one ever. We raised $1.5 million plus, which was far more than we thought we would have. So it wasn't bad. Now what we're noticing is that people are a lot of people are trying to get out and traveling. And so they're less reachable. And we're trying to take the positives of that time and incorporate it into the future, meaning how can we do hybrid events where there's always a virtual component, where we, as last year, had 55,000 people participate in a virtual event with us and got recognition on multiple platforms. Whereas when we did it all in person years ago, we only had 600 people, which to us was huge back then. But now we're dealing with different numbers and we're reaching the whole 50 states, right? Right. So it's hard to figure out how to navigate that now because I think we're learning as we go. But I would not say that it was all bad. There were a lot of positives that came out of that time.
Yeah, I completely agree. All the lessons that you've learned, we learned too. We did not meet our goals because we had some big gifts that were coming down that they said, ooh, give us another 3 months, 6 months. Our board's not ready to have that conversation yet, but we do think those are going to pop now that we're back. You know, what's interesting for us is we built a research institute and we have been kind of struggling with our case for support past the building. You know, how do you explain the innards of program support and position support? Well, then you have a pandemic and we're doing vaccine trials and deploying vaccines. We got our case for support. I mean, you know, like when it happens, you want to make sure the answer's there. So that's what research really does. So lots of great things. The other thing I would add just from my personal practice, I tend to get too relationship heavy sometime. I would much rather sit with somebody face to face and all those times you need to. And what I learned really quickly is that this works, especially for people that are out of town, for people that I can pick up the phone and have that next step conversation before the face-to-face. So I think those are some lessons learned that will just make us more efficient.
And efficiency is good. And, you know, that's one thing about nonprofit organizations, right? We figure out how to be efficient because we have to. We're coming up on the end of our time, but before I ask sort of the wrap-up questions, I want to go to stewardship. Since we've already talked about the dating game and we've kissed the spouse, we've asked for the gift. Let's have a learning opportunity. Give me your best thought for how to steward a major donor, whether that's a specific example or just, you know, a word to the wise. Nuka, I'll start with you.
Stewardship is about relationship management. And if you don't like people, you shouldn't be in the fundraising business because every person's different. And once you get them to the finish line, right, of, as you said, Rich, proposal, they ask and they say yes, you have to maintain the relationship. And that's what stewardship is about if you want them to continue to be married to you. And there's some people that are not good relationship managers and they have to get a divorce, so to speak, or it just doesn't work out, or it was more of a transactional major gift, which those do exist. And I think that it's really about checking in. I think, Shanelle, you talked about that. Being relationship heavy isn't so bad. It's just about how are you doing it and how are you managing your time, right? And you have to do those check-ins. And the check-ins for me are not about asking. You don't continually ask somebody out or ask somebody to marry you. You need to show them that you care. And the care is about the investment that they made in the organization and you showing them the results or showing them the journey to getting the results, showing the impact. And there's multiple ways that you can do that. But again, you got to listen to them and know what resonates. Is it a meeting at Starbucks with you just showing them photography? Is it an invitation to go see a site? Is it just a simple newsletter because they tell you, I'm not in the mood to go to Starbucks. I don't have time for Starbucks. I don't want you spending the money on Starbucks. I'd rather just get a digital summary and then you talking it through with them. I think it's all about you understanding what will resonate, but you having the ultimate responsibility of sharing the impact and results in the journey of how their gift is working. Because I think for supporters, for them to feel good about the investment that they're making, it's not just about them seeing the results, but it's about them getting an update and not feeling like, well, I was just talking to you for this moment because I wanted this now and I've forgotten about you and I've moved on to the next date. So it's about that constant feeding of that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things, we have a pretty streamlined process here at Children's Mercy where we are sending out annual reports, cancer reports, nursing scholarship updates. And then when gifts come in, we nudge the clinician that's the beneficiary of the gift to send a note to say thank you. So that's all going on. And then on top of me, I just did it before I got on this call. I saw that one of my donors invested in a position that a physician has now taken on. So I tried to create them to have a relationship. So that's my job. And then he just got an award. So I just sent her the email and said, hey, I just want you to know what happened with Dr. Chan. This is really exciting. She's already responded saying, oh my gosh, he is fantastic. I'm so glad. I really enjoyed seeing him. When can I see him again? So then that relationship starts coming. I always liken it to when somebody buys you a top for your birthday and they see you wearing it, makes you feel good. Wow, you liked it.
I know whenever somebody buys me a top for my birthday, I always want to wear it for them. So if there's one insight that you want the listener to take away from this conversation or something that they could use to improve their major gifts program, what would that be? Beth, you first.
Just to remember to listen and that any major gift is an investment in your organization with an expected outcome. And a secret tool is I use old tried and true capital campaign tools in my everyday major gift work. Think about how a feasibility study works with an interview process. Why aren't we doing that every day with our donors, sitting down and asking those really important questions? If you had all the money in the world to change the world, what would that look like? What could we do better than we're doing now? When you've got a project and you are starting to vet the project, what could we do better? What are we not thinking of? What can you tell us? Using those questions and having that one-on-one, there will never replace that. And I think Zoom is working, but I still believe in person, one-on-one can't be beat.
I would say that some of the best advice I ever got, and I believe it every time and I implement it, try to every day, keep your fundraisers fundraising. That's what the problem is, right? We start to get away from the actual work, or we start doing program stuff, or we start doing reports or whatever. If you're not fundraising, you're taking your foot off the gas, you're taking their eye off the ball, and they're all going to get away. So you've got to keep your fundraisers fundraising. The other advice I would give is if it is uncomfortable for you to cold call, to reach out, to ask people and listen, you're just in the wrong job. Like, these jobs are special, they're important, and there's a responsibility and a privilege to doing this work. And if you don't feel that in your soul and your gut, they're going to know. And so you're doing a total disservice to your institution.
So everything
that's a strong statement. I just want to cut in there. I'm sorry, Nuka, but that is a strong statement. And I appreciate you saying that, Shanelle. You're absolutely right. Go ahead, Nuka. I'm sorry.
So I was going to say everything that Shanelle said and everything that Elizabeth said, Beth said, everything that they said. Plus, I would say, be thoughtful and plan. I think that most fundraisers have a portfolio, some people call it, or a list, and you can't treat them all the same, and you can't treat each month or week the same, and you can't treat each campaign the same. And so you really have to be strategic, because you usually have a goal or you have a target, and you have to think about the whole and then the individual and how they all fit in. And I think the big thing is planning and being organized. And the thoughtfulness is about you showing that care. And that's all goes with the listening. You talked about somebody complimenting you on a top. It's about knowing what their spouse's name is, knowing when their children are graduating, knowing when their company went public. So it's not just about, again, the relationship management, but what you want, but understanding what is important to them. And that means you got to read, you got to read the paper. Is their company on the cover of the newspaper? Is there something going on in their town or their district that you may want to bring to their attention? It shows that extra care and concern and that thoughtfulness that I think ultimately shows them that they're not just a commodity, that you care very much about them as an individual, and you care because they're caring about you and the mission. So it's about all of that. You have to plan and you got to be thoughtful.
These are great takeaways from this episode, and we have enough questions to go for another hour. Unfortunately, we can't. I want to thank you all so much for participating in this episode and give you an opportunity to tell our listeners once again where they can find out more information about your organizations. Shanelle, Varone, start with you.
Yeah, we're childrensmercy.org. So we are easy to find here in Kansas City, Missouri.
All right. And Nuka Solomon.
We are freewheelchairmission.org.
And you can find out more about Elizabeth Silverstein and me, Rich Frazier, at IPMadvancement.com. Thanks for listening.
That wraps up our discussion about major gift fundraising. Thanks to our panel, Rich Frazier, Beth Silverstein, Nuka Solomon, and Shanelle Varone for sharing their insights and expertise. If you'd like to learn more about our panel members, we'll include that information in the show notes. If you like this episode, please subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app. And leave us a review. Reviews are one of the best ways you can help us reach more nonprofit professionals like yourself. For back episodes and more resources like white papers, infographics, and blog articles, please visit the free IPM Advancement Nonprofit Resource Library at ipmadvancement.com/resources. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.